Hi there, my name's Cindy Seitz-Krug and welcome to another week of a grid design every week. This week I'm going to teach you one of my all-time favorites. It's the basket weave and it's in my book along with several other of these designs. But come on over to the machine and I'll show you some samples of where I've used it in the past and some things that you can do to make it successful. All right. You good there? All right. So, let me see. Let me get my pointer. Here it is on some solid fabric. I do love this one as a background. It doesn't look as good with patchwork because it just looks like parallel lines in the patchwork patches, but you get you lose your basket weave effect. So there it is, and you'll notice on this green fabric I've used matching thread, so you see the design but not any of your boo-boos with your stitching. And I'll show you here too, I've used it as a background behind a quilting motif, and this is a 1/2 inch horizontal vertical grid, and also I used it as a background around some applique, and this is a 3/4 inch grid. And again, I don't like to use a thread that shows up a lot because it shows all your boo-boos. So you can see here, things aren't perfect. My lines are not perfect by any means, but if you just strive to do the best job you can and keep your corners, your pivots square. You want them 90 degrees, not all sloppy like an S curve. You want those very sharp, and that's going to make those designs good. But even this gray fabric with the pink thread, I don't love it because it does show my boo-boos a lot more. So I really prefer this green area with just a shade lighter green thread, and then you just see the beautiful quilting and no mistakes. All right, so let's start. Again, I do like to do it on a small grid, so we're going to use a 1/2 inch horizontal vertical grid, and I've just blocked off a small little area because it's sort of a time-consuming stitch. So I don't want to take all day teaching you guys this one, but again, this one's in my book, so I hope you'll check that out, and if you don't get the whole gist of it here, you can get it in my book. All right, so you're going to start anywhere in a corner, and you don't need to pre-quilt your grid lines. You just have them marked. So we're going to, again, remember we did the number 5 with our Baptist fan or flip-flop Baptist fan. 5 is going to be key here. If you're doing a 1 inch grid, I would say do 7 lines, but you want an odd number of lines. So we're going to stitch on our grid line for number 1. Get rid of these threads. You guys will never see me leaving threads there. I can't handle them. Okay, so that was number 1. We're going to stitch over a little, go down parallel to that first line is number 2. Number 3, we're going to try to make that in the middle of the grid block. Number 4, split the difference, divide the space. And then number 5 is going to be our other grid line. And when you get to the end of 5, you're going to change direction. So we're going to quilt up that grid line, number 1. And you may have noticed where we had openings, now that line just closed all those openings. So that was 1, 2, number 3 should be about in the middle of the block. 4 will be dividing the remaining space, and 5 is our last grid line. And so here's where my students mess up. At 5, they forget to change directions, and so then they make their next block with the lines going the same way, and then they have to take it out because there is no fudging to correct this design. If you make a mistake, you have to stop and remove those stitches. So here's 1, we changed our direction, 2, 3, 4 is dividing that space, and 5. Now we change directions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is the other grid line. Change directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, now let's do another row. We're simply going to change directions. Now let me show you something. Do you see now why I don't really like to use colored thread? It just doesn't look great, but if you use matching thread, you see the design but not the thread. So that's really important, especially for beginners. But even me, I'm not a beginner. I don't like using a colored thread on this design, but I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. So that's why I'm using colored thread here. All right, we're changing directions. 1, oops, I messed up there. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we'll change directions. 1, 2, 3, 4 divides that space, and 5. And you see, I need to slow down because I was being kind of sloppy. Change directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Change directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it takes a little practice trying to get those lines straight. Mine are definitely not that straight, but I'm going to just do the best I can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you can see if I had matching thread, any of these little mistakes, like here I missed my backtracking row, here it's a little curvier than I'd like, those aren't going to show with a matching thread. So that's why I like to match my thread. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like I said, if you're doing this on a 1-inch grid, I would go with 7 lines. So your 4th line is going to be down the middle, and then let's go from there. And if you're using wool batting, once this washes up and you get that, the puff, it looks really pretty. Alright, I think that'll be enough for now. I'll pull that out and show you. So again, I mean, this is anything but perfect, but if I was doing that on a quilt with matching thread, it's going to make a beautiful background. Looks kind of ugly there. In fact, I'll be the first one to criticize my own work. But if you look on the back, even with that rust colored thread, it looks pretty. And let's look at this one again, just to leave you with a good vision of how beautiful basket weave can be if you take your time and do it right. So that is the basket weave. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. It was fun. Like I said, that's one of my favorite designs. It's pretty hypnotic, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But once you get in your rhythm, your lines start to get better and better, and it's a beautiful stitch. So I hope I get to see it in some of your quilts at a quilt show in the future. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week for another grid-based quilting design.